Đồng bộ trong đường đến đối diện sẽ bộ cho trong bộ yang đồ bộ tổ bê lòng rì bộ đồng cho sư đen bộ đề hộ sĩ bộ chư đen châm chư bộ đề khá lo cho hòa la na mê bộ la na mê na hòa song đề chẳng đề đề bê cho hòa cho cha tô bộ la chẳng zem chư tô cho su chê wo gong zhe gong nian zhou chư tong zhe sa chen de na gong bon de bon ma nian ji dian de na chu jie song de ce ge bo jiu la xiang zhe lo nang da gong chu du zu zang wo ye xie jiang zu si jie nian bo 赵宝就得送那那个我公布去年就老样子，先就电报正面大雨就先都找我去老样子了，对着接着随报送忙去，两面就见就老样子了，公布突击接电报，当天准备电报。是那云顶中昨天，地见西老乡子路，大边的强着我就给人个送来着，几多的当初就把西就去老乡子，这年昼夜狼样的老爸到老着多。先给当把眼点点，跟着狼样上子。对吧？这样么叫先给我别送走吧，让给三年用说的，的那上街的吧，干嘛着这忙面当，就忙手啊去吧，满了路到真到不，都是就能得到。则能得别堂吉子巴耶，国光当年解决着的。嘎当那当前面老主，随便做点着我这我哟。
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Altar Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdoms, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the venerable Sharadvatiputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure, they neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There's no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed.
ga zhen qin bi guo nian jie zong dian, guo song tu jin mu zhu zi du su, bian zong ge de xie yue zhen bi gu, da yue zhou yue zhe wang gong yue song, ma lue xie jia ji jin zi bi du, xia jie zu wu de la su wu de, tu jie qian bo de xie du jie chang, chu zi de lo ba da na ro ma, bian jiu zhu bi ba da a de xiang, ya le xin le ji la su wan de, xia bo tong mi yin nian nang zhe de, chu dian de yue de dang zhe bi bi, zhe zang ge san le nian su ling wang, ya jin shi bi ji la su wan de, ya ye yu mi xiu ji le zhu dang, da wo zhe ba ri bi ge zhu ji, san jie gong zhong bo ba ya se song, sa mo da bi ji la su wan de, xie zhu dang bi zhong a de xiang, ga dang dian bi min bo zhong de jie, nian jiu nang ji guo qi song la su, ga dang la ma nang la su wan de, gong ji xin de zi ji song a ma,我道日别往生结杂结，那我点别道不开中间，要是就把家那所望的，就算跟的老妈多结账，看了讲的些年最多的，就当天幕幕中自在的。这些老妈那拉说完的，人家送着给了大爷们，给上他把这边用球，三月这边他给这把爷，现在新年那拉说完的，叫我更多养大那么大。这边去这边了龙须锦，撒当了这有点少做的，多久强给过，娘头说三界就当初界就能了，小猪不多到年就做起，老给去年这边做那些。到了平息三界诸不修，三界就所界出能道，想诸不多，当年就做界，大给去界界别所能界，到了平息三界诸不修，三界就能所界就能道，想诸不多，当年就做。大给去切界别所能解，到了平息三界诸不修。哎呀，给你们背下去了，
也有一些了。
客气啊。哎呀，那俺说最近去天津接把那金龙去收了，金龙去收了。他感觉等这个金龙去收了，我这个，但那个这个高速公路去的南北区域，把台湾这去，那电这些头呢来接把接一对说的，你这边去确实的去金龙呢，是哪怕今年金龙就个人嘛都，我那讲那，能去别接头呢，实际也那了，根本到时来把它对的。
So we are beginning with shaping our motivations to receive the teachings. And shaping motivation is not something that we are just having a blind faith and, fixating one's mind on some kind of faith without having any reasonings. But when we talk about the faith, shaping one's mind in the context of Buddhism, we should understand that shaping of one's motivations must be based on understanding of dependent originations and analyzes. So that is what we should understand when one is shaping one's motivations.
Samba koyang moche, lele che, rwa, busu tono ba tsaya medu karase se nogu mare, jeba che, chaya tongso na, bete gaba je agi, bete go she sha, diso. Da jangu ronji kadin yi, wane, chone che ne, ni jeba che sho se de, sanje ge noa zomba ne zonde, di tanda bada nga so ki jesen dang ne ronde yore, jeba che ne, nga so lanye koro jeba che ne yon yore. Mato ji ki bete kono zengwa dang chos ke mare, yin sa di, soso samba lele che ne, soso yi che na, yi che ge mena, de yi che ge mindu, de karele se ne. 바제네 뽑아 통비거네 니 좋아지네 제게 거거리 다 맞춰나 이게 딱 간제 지 로기루바기 쇼게 상년제는 요 예시지기 최세가 요나 쇼라 되는 거 쇼랑이 뽑아다 되비거네 아니 좋았다 이게 거거예요.
So when shaping one's motivations, one should relax. Don't just, having some kind of, fixating idea when we are talking about shaping one's motivations, but rather one's mind should be in a very relaxed manner, from which then one can analyze one's motivations. It's all analyzations. And with these motivations, one undergo a critical analysis of what the teachings that has been given, what kind of teaching that one has received, what kind of teaching that one is aspire to engage in, to receive the teachings. And one should go through critical analysis of all that. And if any doubt or anything that one is unable to accept, something that we find in certain teachings, one should always raise one's voice, in other words. Always ask the question to yourself, and always ask the questions. If the teacher is someone who's from one of those three great establishments, the monasteries of the Gishis, they are always open to questions of the audience, happy to have the questions.
라바드 가서 줄루 당가서티 템바케 차마시네 줄루 되는 로니 동 주자신 저친도래 단답바드 당가서 지된 데이 토노를 제바 쟁에서데 샤나 사고도 덴바 지산데 체리 바세데 가서 능지 제거로 딱 딘지기 나루라 아니 줄루기 따르기 토노는 덴자지 이번에 제바 쟁에데 다 로지 토노 다 정론지 코너기 사되 인성으로 은혜로와 인자 딘지기 거거지 레베거라 아니 소소 나온 졸라마도 이제 부수 도버체네 대그 거거 그러면도와 이니 메네미스 제바체네 소소 나체 베테 나마토나 야 라니 기대로 야 부수 도버기 따와로.
So the teachings of the Buddha is given more than 2,500 years ago, almost now 2,600 and 2,600 years. And so it's all the teachings that are given by the Buddha and then his followers. It is always said that one should always use one's intellect, be wise, ask questions, analyze. And never says that you should have a faith, whether you accept or not, you should have a faith in certain things. That's not what it is suggested in all the teachings.
나한테지 당아서 던지지 소소기 따와지 봐 소소소리지 고르지 봐 셰샤와이나 아니 냐도르지 당 인지미지 메신다지 정화전의区别소는 손나데 메버체더라 배때 소소 것이 삼바티 던지지와이나 불깔레하고 말에 아니 가요여래 아니 파쇼기 메텔라 따동도 자세가 말에.
So always, remain open in your mind, and cultivate spaciousness of one's mind to have this, make a space in one's mind. And with this, you will not have a stress. You will not have an attitude of complacency. because if one has lacked those open-mindedness, then there's always chances of looking at others' positions or others' standpoints, whether it is right or wrong. You will have a negative way of looking at that. So if you remain open mind and be honest, and whether the other person is one's opponent or not, and when that person is displaying his or her standpoints, due to this open-mindedness, you're able to accept that willingly.
근데 다 맞아 된저지 이거 싶이 돈에 아니 다 맞아 이게 제바 제 가르를 제바 제거서나 다 소소게 가사 장르기 때서 진 메비 돈에 제바 전한다 고야스케만 다 맞아 이 제바 가르 제거서나 아니 맞아 요로니 또 맞아 그는 아니 덤바세네레 기겐세네레 오늘 양체 집에 강사지 내초 도지되는 배네 시지 내단세네레 취진양내세나 근데 콜로도 보되는 바 손손에 근데 remba sung sung ge ne tamba de ni ma so ge de ge cheba sen na ba sa ta me shi ga ji ku ge sung de la ni je sen ju ai za ne ni tamba tu be on bo de la ni shin da chen mo ni ge zhe be ne la re ji be la ma na de ne no chi xie ji de je na ba la rong ge de je na ka la mo su yue sa.
So, the teachings of the Buddha is given by the Buddha himself more than 2,500 years ago, who came to this world and attained enlightenment in the place called Bodh Gaya in India, and proceeded to training the will of Dharma, so 3 training of the will of Dharma. And this teachings, the will of Dharma, turned by Buddha, are later on carried out by his followers, such as Narayana, Asanga, and so forth. And this is the teachings that we are dealing with, is the teachings that are given by those lineage gurus, the great beings. So it is therefore one should think of in before oneself in the space, Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by all those great beings such as Nagarjuna and Asanga.
ai ji la ni sta la ni sen na ji da ma so ge ka su bo ba la ni chemo yin za ne ni din ji so mo po ji ne kam chen shi di zon je ga ba ani ta tem ba de ji on de sha na ani shin da sen je se ye de lu du da to me ani pe kan chen kai jong se ni shin da sen je se la yu de ani o mi da yi to de ro ba shin da sen je se ne ni ne je ro mo chen se di ba jin nam je yi ji da jin ne se pe na lu du ni ba ta ba ji pe wa ro 아니 때나 배나 루드니 바타버지 때 아니 가르래 아니 도마 템비다고 케루지 가사 간제션 뭐 비타슈지 지파 뭐도 리피 온슈세인데 제스 여세 손보텔라 뭐네 전에 때 리피 논체기파 맞아요나 지 상일에 대버세거라 대리선이 대리 뒤서를 질 배장에나 딱 배네 세 버데 가서고 다 피도 심어 세도 담바 베나로와 내가리 가사 도하 템비 다보 케르제서와 아니 뭐도 리베 온슈 제서제세요디 뭐도 기르파세요디 콜라 다다 무슨 다다 비 떠슈제 리페 세도 되네 아니 온지 통에게 아니 주부 담바세거라 된저게 아니 다가서 예세송세들이 된저지야 그 맞선에 존예 보인사데 야 된저게 초알레비 되네요 라면 연대대지 상바상지 맞선에 지 대파리지 제로 제는 선나 쉬고 사버 송도
So at this point, the teachings that we are discussing is the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, which is immaculate teachings and uncomparable teachings, which we are fortunate to be able to engage in the discussions on such great teachings. And so just as the great teachings of the Buddha are, elaborated and, elaborated and taught by the great Indian pioneers, particularly the Nagarjuna and Asanga, who are known as the great pioneers of the teachings of the Buddha, who carry out the teachings of the Buddha, who transmitted teachings of the Buddha. In the same manner, in Tibet, the great pioneer is Lama Tsongkhapa, who is also known as the second, Nagarjuna in Tibet, was known as second Nagarjuna as Lama Tsongkhapa. So therefore, it's Lama Tsongkhapa, the way he, writes his, teachings, the way he teaches are all based on the reasonings and using very sharp intellect. It is not something that he said, this is what you should believe, this is what you should have a faith in this and that, but rather it's just always based on reasoning. The reasoning is emphasized very strongly for his followers. So therefore, Lama Tsongkhapa was known as the great pioneer of the snowland. And then his two sons, his first sons, was known as Gesab Rinpoche, who is the custodian of the teachings of both Sutra and Tantra, and who's his another son, who is also the spiritual son, who is also known as knowledge through the power of things themselves, or also known as the factual reasoning, who has the great power of factual reasonings, the reasoning of the power of fact.
Joji se dachi, tanda nga su soso ye tanda desa nana nga su chi go chi, soso nana chana to na, sonja shimbo sonja chi ma yinba, kolan de yi tingi, chi so chang ten yon su zo ba, deri nga su chi ren de yi to na yo ne, ta jinde ki ten de ne son de, tobi ta san chi ten de chi pa de, ngubi ne si yi to na doni che ge ye sa, de yang yon su zo ba de mari pi me pa le si pe tanda, nga su teni di churan de na, ten de yo sang ge de chi,
So in their presence, imagining oneself being in their presence, the great beings that we have mentioned earlier, and then one is surrounded by all those sentient beings without exceptions, and having a motivations of engaging in the discussions on the great teachings, discussions on how things really are, discussions on, in other words, things that are mere imputations, things that are imputed by term and conceptions. So let's, remain on this motivations and focus for a couple of minutes. With these motivations, the teachings that we are discussing today is the lamp that dispels the darkness of the three worlds, the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment by Lam Rim Chenmo.
되지. 당가 주주의 가래에서는 주군 셈바 때문에 제법이 차와서요. 담바 투비 한번에 랑게 전제 짜이나 메버제. 네 고송도 제에 대해서나지 땅 사제 동비가라.
So the first outlines the greatness of the authors given in order to exhibit the teachings as a noble source. So for that, when one is reading through this first outlines, one should think of the qualities of the great teachers such as Buddha Shakyamuni, all the way to one's own root teacher, of their qualities of the body, speech, and mind.
다 담말 규바치비시 추체 차와서요. 랑리 치모기 저자라. 아니 주부지 아니 제완 되기 때문에 여러 시어상에 손에라 나중에 되리. 되네. 아니 탐블로비 손주 마타지 바지 저자 용수 줘봐 땜바. 아니 라드랑데와 저자 용수 줘봐. 라미 명아지 잡아. 등주기는 아니 쳐 잡아 첨부지 전지.
So then the next outlines, when one is reading the next outline, show the greatness of the teachings in order to gender the rest for the teachings. For that, and then try to reflect one's mind upon the contents of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and think about the contents, beginning from being oneself as a having beginning from the practice of moralities of oneself, and being someone whose moral conduct is the impeccability of one's moral conduct, and all the way to the state of enlightenment. And this is the contents of the teachings that we find in this particular text, the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment.
那你现在的小孩对你当起跟了就是过来搞得起这样吧，大家常识。
And then how to listen to the teachings and teach the teachings, which is the teachings with so that is already been covered during our first talk.
但当把我叫那么记得这些人吧了，你那就早些年点比赛呢，点了落去大上有人把你也是的，你把早晚些了，同步看这些结果来也是呢，主要个问题，你同步先年吃到的么就点小，你先年吃到的比点边点呢，你就是多个来也是的，这一三件事，用我一。
So then about the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught actual instruction, which is also one of the very important and outlines. So when this outline actually suggests how one can actually engage in the actual, how one gets actually engage in the practice of practice of the great deities of the stages of path to enlightenment, beginning from the proper relying upon a spiritual masters all the way to the state of enlightenment.
对起，俺就是对劲老个要啊，我比那自己看上了老的两年前，两年一下里头呢，两年前呢，刚出这个人呐，啥节的说个刚了过要不就啥节的没也，小个说一年的我记得嘛不，啥节日头呢，刚叫呢过来呢，生气人就话的呢，什么现在都爱的哇。
So I always tell individual who are interested in engaging in the practice of the Lam Rim, great deities on the stage of path enlightenment, just telling them to memorize those very important outlines, and having memorized, then not only just reciting those outlines, but first one recite the outlines and then try to remain and reflect one's mind upon the meaning of this outlines, and then meditate right from the beginning of the first outline, second outline, third, fourth, and so forth. So this is not just memorizing and just reading it, rather one should be able to apply one's meditation while one is reading those outlines.
다 때는 로체다 제 림발니 디디나 님볼렘 비시 그와다 님보 제단님 비스니 제 동버리 다 님보 제단님 비스라니 나지 나자는 게 받지다 님볼렘 생거지 동버리사 다 님보네 생거는 송 주부 충분다 통만 나지로 주부 전다 주부 챔피언 나지를 만냥서네 세제 동버니지 다 주부 챔피언 나지를 만냥서네 저라 송 태전은 주부고 세제 관한데 뭐 센데 다 주부 수 센제는 쇼발고 세제 동버니지 센제는 쇼발로 저라 송 센제는 로발로 로고 비전세 토시레레와로 로베 산제문 주바 덴바 로발로베 림바니 셰바지 다 동버니지 다 로발로베 림바니 셰바니 테바침보 쩔라노데다 치바도 도제 테바로 세제 다 동보라 송 샹세제 로발한데 장 장네데 세제 담바송 손에 제달림비 수유지 동버니지 손에 제달림비 칠라니 강라 송 강라 로비제 델 로바데 델 로비 림바지 다 델라 동버니지 다 델라 로비 림발라니 쇼바찔라라데 치바도 파신 타마니라 거스이제 동보든지 다 파신 타마니라 거슬 주 신의 라도 편시바 데니가 강급이 전 데니 땡인지 근데 디제 때바 신의 라도지 rabde yawa 데니가 강급이 전세 수 고랭에 봐 소셜라 지지 다 동보 마데지 다 소셜라 신의 라도 라도라지 동보지 다 라도라지레지 라동就做点吧，拉动钢笔这钢笔拉动就拉对呀，拉动钢笔拉动这边设计，他动不了你长电当是长电当长电当年代就送了我说啊，那入驻就给我们这边设计大众啊，那东北你就到电了，开吧，就东北你到电了没？东北你就到电了，电矿那年我说当电嘛，电矿那年了就被人把当电矿那年电了，对吧？我就东北这。말에 네 다 동벌라 리피 가자 뭐죠 대 타랑가게 루시바 셰바 tel라 때네 도와질래 집에 바지 동벌라 아니 가자 뭔지 그 비제 가자 뭐 맞아 미래로 가봐 아니 장로 샤바지 당가서 가서 보고 장로 샤바 세대는 맞아 동반이 이제 도와 tel라 페바 페 친제라 아니 동보 아니 가자 뭔지네 아니 가자 대가네 아니 대가비 메가 돈이 또 비타랑 질레 저거 인산 동보 가자 세대 가르라라 그래 세대 개체듯이
So we are on in the chapter where one is establishing one's own standpoint with regard to the ultimate nature of reality or emptiness. Because when we are discussing on emptiness, it is first well, one must have extensive discussions on the object of negations. Having done with the discussions of the object of negations, and in other words, having identified the object of negations, then one must establish one's own, understanding or one's own standpoint of what is ultimate nature of reality or the emptiness. So it is therefore we are in the particular chapter where we are establishing one's own standpoint of one's own viewpoint of emptiness or the ultimate nature of reality.
那我是等的这一个可是一站的就下上了而已呢，但我这边呢，但也可是点这一行也可以研究到这些的哪些金马天呢？我说这里叫个 KK 嘛的。到一头呢，一头脑路了，碰上去缺嘛头啊，也说呢，学吧一头了，给肉嘛的，是吧？到一碰上去的，两个他都得俺说搞的是呢，可能把如果的做啥的搞所谓的，那你全让他妈没把那打的把那刚一切的马里巴的也刚一切个都打死，你马里巴生意的没不马上亲戚了，你全让搞的钱呢，咱们这个就原没都，如果做啥的马里巴谁的这个做的。
So here, all our way of establishing ultimate nature of reality is based on understanding of dependent originations. It is based on understanding of dependent originations. One will be able to understand how one can reverse from this cyclic existence, how one can free oneself from this cyclic existence. what makes us revolve within this unenlightened existence? What is the method and skillful means for of freeing oneself from this unenlightened existence or the secular existence? And so this is how the view at the extensive the view of emptiness plays a very key role in our practice and things, because without having a perfect view of emptiness, without understanding, without having actual view of understanding of emptiness or ultimate nature of reality, then one's practice or conduct, will not be a pure. It cannot be a pure, because one will always remain under the influence of this ignorance. When one remains under the influence of this ignorance, it will always give rise to all kinds of negative thoughts and emotions, which lead to negative actions of body and speech. Therefore, without having the perfect view of ultimate nature of reality, a correct view of ultimate nature of reality, one will not be able to have a conduct, a pure conduct or actual pure practice of body and speech as well.
근데 말이 봤을 때 가서 뭐 현지치 좋아. 근데 변화 실로 있다 언시 지사 그래. 다 근데 소화지 예 진짜로 거든요 또 이게 나가 수수 용도 이게 아니 담보 되는 게 지라 말이 봤을라 그래. 이거 비내실에 더 됐어 그래. 다 간제 스카스 제고 차본데 차보 성인데 지래 거.
So this ignorance is with us, within us, along with us from the beginningless time up until now, and which always obscure how things really are. When it is not actually, allowing us, it hinders us from seeing how things really are. And it is because of these hindrances, one is unable to see how things really are, and whatever the actions that one may take from one's body and speech, it always doesn't correspond. It do not correspond to the reality, which then becomes a negative actions.
당가서 자체 잠 말이 빠이 온 시험도 들어더라. 말이 빠이다 냥들 깨지 자연 제터 메버 말이 빠 코로라이 가서 단다 가서 이제 센터에 다 로봇 센터에 그 소원을 가서 단다 가서 말이 바래.
Up until now, from the beginningless time, we have really relied on this ignorance and believed in ignorance, and we let ourselves remaining under the power of this this ignorance.
다도와 당가 소리다 당가서 대답이 말이 보면 진로네 르고 루루지 시바 인데세 배정한 때에 갔어.
Arelo.
또 뭐 루루지 시바 인데 돈이 되죠 발에 손도 왔다 되네 마 갈래로도 고아지네.
So let's read through the text. We're on the page 209, right? We have completed the first paragraph of this, and then we're beginning from the second paragraph. So Nagarjuna, the protector, also accept this system of identifying ignorance for the 70 stanzas of emptiness says.
주다 전에 정원나 양다반에 또바강 되는 덤베 말이 송 대래 연라 진인 중 양다 통식 뭐 동바 레시 말이 민중와 되는 말인가 봐이 대시 연라 진인가 제송신 사실 러에 내주바 레장 송도.
So here it says, the teacher said that ignorance is a conception that in reality things are produced from causes and conditions. From this, the 12 factors arise. Through seeing reality, you know that things are empty. Ignorance does not arise. This is the cessation of ignorance. Because of this, the 12 factors ceases. Also, the 26 chapters of his fundamental deity says.
되지. 때때로 다른 것은 마리바 메보소 그 가리체는 마리바 메보소 고래 마리바 인가서 같이 고래라서나 아니 마리바 생에 되게 아니 야라 텐데 야라 주니게 마리바 제 이제네 아니 레데사 레데게 온게 콜 코고여레스 아니 Mariba then gas on Rochana, and Tende Yana Junior and God ready, any queeness Chow Lemagan is a chagre on it.
So this, verses that we have read earlier, what is actually, the essential meaning of this verse is that why we have to, eradicate this maripa, or the ignorance, because if one do not eradicate this maripa, what will happen to us? Where this maripa will take us? So if we were to ask this question to ourselves, if we are unable to eradicate this maripa or the ignorance, and it will always enable us to engage in negative deeds, which accumulates karma, negative karma. And it is because of this negative karma, one will go through the cycle of 12 links of dependent originations. If one understands the ignorance is the one that is root cause of our revolving within this 12 links of dependent originations, and one will be able to engage in the practice that eradicate this maripa, so that one will be free oneself from this 12 links of dependent originations.
그래서 자기가 말에 돈이 되지 받지 거서 배트 chamache yen ta ko de lena ya da pa ne to ba se de ni je da chen le che ba ji yin na ya da pa tu ban zen de de la mari ba sa la gre so do nga so da ya da pa to ba se so na be na ya da pa tu ban zen ba la so na ni de ba tu ban zen ba ran shi tu ban zen ba se la gro.
No. So here it says that here it says the teacher has said that ignorance is the conception that in reality things are produced from the causes of condition. From this, the 12 factor arise. Through seeing reality, you know that things are empty, so ignorance does not arise. This is the cessation of ignorance. Because of this, the 12 factors ceases.
Sashi raya nye rupa le chang anche mari nga pan jo na ne deje nankin jong min je mari nga pan jo wa je na ne shepe teni gambe so tetan teni nga jo ba tetan teni ngu min je donghe pumbo bashi ba teni tetan yangda nga 제 송바 다야 텐지 지시 퐁본 제바 셰 퐁본 제바 쿠이 자와 송바 다 신든 지체와 여 신든 지바 인노 파발레 셰바이 셰바이 인바네 류라네 원 지제도 셰소 쿠이 자와 남시 때 송바나 장베 세와 땡도 송도 로벤치.
So when ignorance is stopped, the compositional activities will not arise at all. That which stops ignorance, is knowing that meditating on reality. By stopping this, and the earlier factors of dependent arising, this and that later factors will not arise. In this way, you thoroughly stop the whole mass of sufferings. This and the other passages just cited are in agreement and fit together very well in the line in the Nagarjuna's precious garland, as long as you conceived of aggregates, which says that the root of cyclic existence is the conception of the aggregates that intrinsically existence. The noble Aryadeva also assert this, and clearly indicated by the passage cited earlier, just as the tactile sensory faculties pervades the body and soul, and also the root of cyclic existence is regular cyclic existence is the consciousness.
되지. 다 맞게 동부 도시야. 되니 세체 동부 맞고 코에데 변에 양라 중니시 거는 양라 돈이 투메 말이 번이 받으시 손바 나시지 된데서나니 코아 코적이는 받으시 여기 거라 코이 자와데 말이 바레세 되게 코아데네 말이 방가서는 소만 가그레 세데 계체데 지지바체 다 지수 폼버지 바 대세 때는 만세 생각이 거라 아니 세미 거라 배는 대로아 가서 가서 가는 지다 거의 자시 받는 가거를 세대 배나 맞선 로지 배나 퐁퐁 많이 퐁버 많이 퐁버된 라시 주변지면 짐바에 친절라 감사되라 마라시 주변지면 짐바에 차려서 대비 되게 장 아니 지다도 거의 싸워야 뭐 고쳐버려서 지다랑 안제다 가요 지다스 다치 돈을 깨치시면 그 아니 퐁버 라시 주변지면 짐바 감사 수익질이야나 감사 대질라 마라시 주변지면 짐바에 차려서 지다지쇼.
So therefore, it says when one is able to stop the maripa, then will stop whole circle of the different originations, the volitional acts and consciousness and so on and so forth will be stopped just by stopping the ignorance itself. And so then this will stop the grasping at grasping at aggregates as one's aggregates or the self, because as long as we have this grasping at aggregates or transitory collections, in other words, jigda, the grasping at transitory collections, and then one will always have, as long as you have this grasping at transitory collections, you will always have the view of inherent existence, seeing the inherent existence of the self and others. With this, one will always be remaining under the control or the power of ignorance, which then lead oneself to taking rebirth within this unenlightened existence.
대중 가서 쉐라 근데 간사게 당제데 취지 당제 제디 간사 란신 주변지면 zem발라 간사게 당제라 근데 풍보 란신 주변지면 zem발라 아니 취지 당제세나라 제당 뒤진 여와시베가라 얘나야 취지 다도 주변지면 당제야나 뒤지라 간사게 당제 거버리 세는바 소소기 아니 쉐바체.
So normally when we talk about the grasping, so we talk about two kinds of grasping as self of person and the grasping as self of phenomena. Whichever the whichever this one of this grasping it exists within one's continuum, one will always be remaining under the power of ignorance.
디오 이시와라 이게 아니 그 가사 릴레네 원제제도 띵무길라네 대신 녀모 당제 띵무 좀베 좀버제 세위디 거라 아니 띵무데 거의 자와인 봐 대양 아니 고투거레스 네 거의 자와 나시데세 거의 자와나 가레인 바데 아니 대이 고투거레스 들어와.
So just as the Aradeva stated, just as the tactile sensory faculty pervades the body, the delusion lies within all the afflictions. Therefore, by destroying delusions, it will destroy all afflictions. So as delusions here referring to ignorance again here. So as long as you have this ignorance, and you will not be able to free yourself from cyclic existence. It is the time when you are able to stop this ignorance or eliminate or ignorance completely, then you are free yourself from cyclic existence.
땡요서 가서 고알리디 그 소소견도서라 고알리니나 녀모게 니미데 자친보이 바지 고투고다 당세기 나사베디 강갈레 쳐대야 마소기 주보진나 주비기 리중 온보데 리기냐라 용수 조발레 쳐대요로 와스 대나히기 아니 녀모게 간제진에서나 거의 싸이 싸와데 아니 띵무이 쳐대요래 띵무 마리바이 쳐대요래스 아니 띵무 마리바데 메보치 조소나 기냐라 용수 조발 메보 차버로 와스 베티 So
here it's just as we talked about, just as the tactile sensory faculty pervades the body, delusion lies within all these afflictions, which tells us that all those negative thoughts and emotions, when we talk about afflictions, there are numerous afflictions that are within us. But all of those, afflictions, the root cause of all of these afflictions is the ignorance.
로베죠 오미텐저서 가샹고비 주바 지니지 somba tangje jang timu ge chue nang la rangi ngu chubi drotaba rangshin de ka ne che na je rangi ngu ni meba tenpa nzeba yinbe mari pe zintang sunjungwa kuni tenda ripa tansu somba yinbe buddha palta le sondo.
So when the Master Nagarjuna refutes the object of negation in the fundamental teachings, he gives all of this diverse arguments so as to refute an intrinsic nature, delusions, delusions or reification of the phenomena as essential existence, and to show the phenomena like essence. Thus, Nagarjuna gives wide range of argument only for the sake of eradicating the way that ignorance apprehends things. Buddhapalita's commentary on the fundamental deity says.
Tate nga zo kuwa yabu shivu chi len tu kur se chara. Ko tsawa derwa nga zo shunju no la, yang la dada tangche ne tu pe shiro tuan tu song se ya rawa. Chu sanje ki chu yonsu zoba song kari tuan tu song bari la so na, sanje taba ta tangche chimba tabi che. Te taba ta tangche chimba taji ki ke de mebo zobi tuan da la, nanso de song ba se wa na ki chu nanso ba chi song ba rawa.
So, just as we find in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where it says that all the branches of the teachings that sage has given is for the purpose of generation of wisdom, realizing emptiness. So, therefore, it is all those teachings that Buddha has given is directed towards attainment of liberation and attainment of omniscience. So therefore, in order to gain state, in order to attain, liberation is omniscience, and one must understand how things really are. One must generate this wisdom that understands ultimate nature of reality, without which one will not be able to either state, the state of liberation and state of omniscience.
대체 다 맞아 쇼치는 상나 갔다 온 거잖아. 배나 맞아 네바치 라 메슈 첨부지 제거에나 갈래갈래 제는 마도 메데 하도 그 창조 제셔야 메도아. 대나기게 상제기 중고를 받고 있는데 걸 디시 칸데 메발라 때네. 아니 타도 아니 가르레 그 동반이 이제 따와 사실 메고 또비 된다. 아니 렌치 치바라와. 맞아 대나리 첨부는 집에서는 렌치 치바레 소한테 렌치 치바데 가사게 엄부 레발라 때네 렌치 치바 이름마도 야 가사 신도 내고 있어나 가도 동반이 대샤네 되기라.
So it is just as the medicine that cures our sickness, just having one medicine or one kind of medicine, although at one time will not be able to cure one's sickness or whatever the disease that one may have. It requires gradual treatments. In the same manner, when the Buddha teaches the teachings, he teaches the teaching in a gradual manner, in accordance with the followers or the disciples' inclinations and mental dispositions. So therefore, we find in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment itself that that teaching will gradually take yourself to the stages of the path of three scopes.
Didoa mari bagin zeta sunjung kuni tande ripa tanso somba yimba sando tesedi mari ba mebo chiko hi tanda la ripa tanso somba rese la yudi eni te ko ngaso ichi go do ngaso ki tsawa do tanda de nge shi ge jense kar se so na ngaso omi ki tawa de la kwa shu che taba de uma taje ki tawa de la shu chen bo chi kwa de ji da zhuo de ji pero jiao yin na mene ngaso ki ba so zan je den jun do go so zan zhou ji sen do.
So therefore it says, it is in order to eradicate our ignorance. The great masters and the teachers have given a various kinds of teachings, the variety of teachings and reasonings in order to eradicate our ignorance. because just one reasonings or one type of teachings is not as sufficient to eradicate our ignorance.
Juba bida palita leche, tenjin rewa jungwa, jisa tembala gopa chi chena chi sheba asa. Ya sheba chi, robe tuji dani chenji senchen nang, donghen tanso chi nyeba zine, teta namba chowa shayi shera, ngombo nang chi yang taba chi tawa ni rauta tenpa shebe, tenjin rewa jungwa jisa tenpa le zangde, yang taba mayi ba, yang taba mayi tongwa chi je, yang taba tongwa namba chowa she sombe shero sombe. No, tiba te insare.
So, but forget the earlier translation, but which also mentioned that, if one is able to really be able to adapt this, the view of Madhyamaka Prasangika, and one will change one's outlook, one will be able to change one's way of looking at world, one's worldview will be completely changed. So now, when the Master Narayana refute the object of negation, the Buddha Pali's commentary on the fundamental deity says that what is the purpose of teaching dependent arisings? The Master Narayana, whose very nature is compassionate, so that living beings are beset by various sufferings and assumed the task of teachings, the reality of things as it is, so that they might be free. So he therefore began the teachings dependent arising. For this, it is for it is, he said.
Let's
take a 10 minutes break at this time.
Pena sanjaki tenjin dewa juwa songgubi jinsen karere songdoa. Ane tenjin dewa juwa songgubi jinsen de lambe ta tuji jen zo cheche to so ngombo ludo janare, tenpa tubi ngombo la janare, chiba che marwa. Ane dani jenje sanjana je donghen na tsoba chi zine, teta le choba shawi shir, ane ta tenjin dewa juwa songwa re sena. Ane tari tenda tere doa.
Nima, you are muted.
Sorry, okay. Why the Buddhas taught the dependent origination, Buddhas and Nagarjunas have taught the dependent originations. For what reason they taught the dependent originations is that the reason for giving the teachings on the dependent originations by those great beings of the Buddha, be it the Buddha or Nagarjuna, is to understand, letting his followers understand how things really are.
Nga zo tende teba na te arwa, chu chi chi ni ka tsenpa tende ni le sang ten ju, tenya nyangen de she te shenje menze cho la me se de, sanje chande de ki tende rawa le kene songo ma re.
So, just as we have find in the praise to dependent originations, where Lama Tsongkhapa stated that your whatever the the teachings that you have given are based on dependent originations, and all the teachings that are based on dependent originations, it has a functions of giving rise to the peace and the liberations. In other words, the producing, providing the peace and liberations to the followers of the teachings of the Buddha Dharma.
이전 같은 경우다 제대로 근데 선제기 철학이 디바데 샤기 랭고 말에 동해데 샤기 랭고 말에 디바데 추고 추고 말에 아니 가르쳐 걸잖아 친이 덴바 덴베 좋아져 세대래 들어와 추 탄지 덴바 메바 덴데 거는 덴 거로와 아니 선제기 가서라 아니 덴데 때네 아니 덴바 메바 덴 거로마도 아니 카투 덴바 데 임베 시에쳐 말어 친이 덴바 덴베 좋아서도 고치바래 단데 된다데.
So therefore, Buddha has stated that nor I cannot, watch the negativities of the other sentient beings by pouring waters on them. Neither I can, transfer my knowledge or the qualities to the disciples or the followers. But I can, free all sentient beings from this secular existence is by giving them a teachings on how things really are, giving them the teachings on dependent originations, in other words.
라바도 가서 추연이 비가라 네 랑라 네바타빈 데히에 추라 메타빈 데시세데 고아 딜렌사데레 랑라 데시 샤바찬지 마레 랑니 마리 바이 샤모도 주빈 네바 토모찬데 데라 메네 리파 다메토비 셰사나레 니 랑제 네바 니 디진 가서 추 컨조데 적모이 세게 제세도스 강가 고아 되는 거.
So it is therefore right from the beginning that when we're receiving the teachings of the Dharma, one should consider oneself as the sick person, or one is affected by sudden sickness and so forth. And then receiving the teaching itself, it should be considered as something that is a medicine that which can cure one's sicknesses and so forth. We are not actually exaggerating here. We're not just saying something that doesn't correspond to reality, but rather in reality we are sick. Whether we are physically ill or not, but we are always sick from these delusions. We're affected by these delusions at all time. So therefore, and this should be eradicated by reflecting one's mind upon the ultimate nature of reality, or the of an emptiness. It is for this reason when we talk about taking refuge in jewels, the Dharma refuge, jewel Dharma is said to be the actual refuge.
디게 따와데 때나 베베깔라 가서 지 대바인가 남바이세 개체도 로서 코노에 말다 제바 코노에 제대되는 라니 되는 주주르마도 지 이체바서는 로에 개체지 말에 됐어 이 디스케시 베깔라 노로반 주네 신주 제르마도.
When we were, going through the analytic here, analyzing how things really are, it is not based on based on one's belief system. We're also actually analyzing the reality of things, ontological status. It is that what we are doing. It's nothing to do with the religion or anything. It's nothing to do with one's own belief system. Rather, we're just completely focusing on how things really are. That's what we're doing.
뭐보는 양 따버 지따워 럽도 템바 셰베 땡진 저완 좀뭐 템바 상데 제세 가르레 선에 땡진 저완 좀 송고 가르선 양 따버지 마통아이나 친샤레 당샤레 양 따버지 토로제나 델레 저도레 가서 코알레 저시베데 친와레 저바 세그라.
So therefore it says, seeing what is not real, you are bound. Seeing the real, you are free. So what is the reality of the things? Yes, it is. It is absence of essence. So here now we are actually, confined by this ignorance, which doesn't allow us to see how things really are. It is only by seeing how things really are you'll be free yourself from this confinement.
되지. 아니 나중에 나 저런 뭐 이제 예로 metro 쉐든 시시에 세든 그래서 때는 예로도 trouble 그래. 그래서 때라 페발라 때는 세그러. 또 때라 페발라 때는 뭐네 오미 따와 생기데 뭐네 할래지를 샤상이 저러. 바 당하지지.
So therefore, Lama Tsongkhapa has stated, someone who is wise, and how can they do not appreciate in the teachings of different originations?
또 이제写送别 싫어지. 뭐 본나지 한다고 짓다와니 강인 셰바사. 뭐니 메바니 야 니지. 대 메케바 띠무게 미베 로드지 미 지바네스. 뭐 본나라 뭐니도 넘버 또바나. 대달인데 차 셰당 다 제와 셰도 대다게 세 땡진 저완종와 시빈 나에 띠무게 미바세데 싫어지 미게 뭐보나지 뭐니 매바 나 통에 디세나 내 매발라 대이 대차 당 셰당지 매도 셰송 신송도 라예 가르 셰송시 라예 니루 창조도 송도
What is the reality of things just as it is? It is the absence of the essence. Unskilled person whose eyes of intelligence is obscured by the darkness of delusions, conceived of an essence in things, and then generate attachment and hostility with regard to them. when the illumination of the knowledge of dependent arising clears away the darkness of delusions, and the eye of wisdom sees the absence of essence in things, then there is no foundation for the others' reflections and attachments, and hostilities do not develop. Also in the transition of the 26th chapter, that same text says,
되지. 딴 데로 와. 뭐 뭐야 답을 따와서 간디지레세 라와이나 아세. 딱 맞춘 대로 왔다. 뭐니라 메케비 티무지 메베 로드지 미지바세. 맞춰 단다 맞춰 카드 단다 따라하래. 미지네 이 가르치고서는 뭐 보나 뭐니도 넘버 또 봤으디 롯다네. 네 대차당写当了说 제바 시그레 세데 단다 나나 변의 선천적이 안시되래.
So here in this particular paragraph, it talks about the situation of ordinary beings like ourselves, that we are in this situation at this point. What it says is, what is the reality of things just as it is? Just as it is. It is the absence of essence. Unskilled persons whose eyes of intelligence is obscured by the darkness of the delusion, conceived of an essence in things, and then generate attachment and hostility with regard to them. So it is because of that we generate all kinds of negative thoughts and emotions, attachment, aversion, and sense of competitiveness, and so on and so forth. It is all because of the ignorance which actually obscure us from seeing how things really are. So we are completely in this situation at this point.
다 된게 가서 때 메바노 한 등에 얘인데 차셔도 때문에 막 공부를 차대야 돼. 대랑 가서 가르 손에 메바데 노한테 세거잖아. 배가서 되진 노한테인데 소화메 봐서 그러. 관계에서 땡진 저와 좀 시비 노에 때문에 메바 세신 송도.
So therefore, then it's what really, overcomes or clears out this darkness of this ignorance. Then where it says in this, when the illumination of the knowledge of dependent arising clears out the darkness of delusions, and the eye of wisdom sees the absence of the essence in things, then there is no foundation for the other afflictions, and attachment and hostilities. Hostilities do not develop.
되지. 되진 가서 이게 노에 여타세 동배 메타세세 되래. 노아세 땡데래자 땡진 저완 좀와이나 장신 주고 여마레세 고안해는데 장신 주고도 까노로 여바도 세노로. This timude seno sondo a loy mole jayo
So therefore, in the three principal aspects of the path where the Matsangapa status, that the appearance dispels appearance dispels the extreme view of nihilism, and the emptiness dispels extreme view of externalisms. So, in other words, it is both, appearance and emptiness will help us to overcome or eradicate our ignorance.
아야. 내가 때서 가서 변화 나서나서 노예 때문에 얘도 동배 메타세도 제단도 탄지다 초면 저러세 돼서 연장자 나서 이토는 아니 따올래 때서 되니 제거야나 단다기 치듯이 제되기 빼편도라 맞아 내려와 따와 때는 배박이 되니 쟁여야나 따와기 고소나 코다긴 제바 가야부터서 때서 다 때서 강자나 rotan dusre soso toba chue to toba ranji le che ne nge tanji lo na ki kharang la shu de nyane chenge che na ngone ne ba the je yor ta nga zo nga da ji ba re ta kha rang la lo ne nyane chi me je bi ka la ni ji sem ba da chu ni ki ba ro le jang ren bo ji cha ga de lo yin bi ka la ni yi cho ne nge ji che ya ja sha de ne ko ten je che ne cha do ye chi ji ro.
So here, if one is really following the teachings and practicing and consider oneself as a practitioners, and when we come to such discussions and going through those teachings, and when we are being all by ourselves at home, and then combine those teachings with the teachings relating to this profound view of emptiness, such as three principal aspects of the path and the teachings of Nagarjunas and Bodhipalitas and so on and so forth. If one is able to combine all of this, then one will be able to understand the deeper meaning of dependent originations. So it is traditionally, this is how we should meditate, by reading those different explanations on dependent originations, and explanation given by those great beings, and then try to meditate on that. This is how we can really elevate ourselves from this obscuration of omniscience and obscurations or liberations. So if one is unable to do that, just when one is reading and receiving the teachings, one becomes so appreciative and one sees this as something that is very important. But when one is done with the teachings, and if one do not really undergo the teachings that apply to one's day-to-day practice, then one's mind and the practice of the teachings and the practice will become apart. There was a big gap between the two, so then one will not be able to, one is unable to work for the elimination of one's darkness of ignorance.
tendechi nga so tenhi chi ma jawa ina nga so te me sende chi na so so chongzen ro chi doa ta me sende chi na so so demba yin sang chi ma to de keche jin shi sa ma de ben jete pe pe ki keche chi so na nga so chi keche ma don ro chi she de nya do de yo bi ka la ta kono de ngene kono la ran ta chi ye sa ne rani le ja jo de chi demba shu jin zen de ngi chang chang re doa ma se na ran shi se na te kanje yin na sang ji ro ma sende chi na da re doa 맞아 고고전에 깨치치 시비가라 다 소소는 거네 이 총진로지 대마도 소소 예상에게 소소라 봐 리치 간징이 따와지도.
So in other words, in our day-to-day life, when we come to association with the other peoples, and when we were, associating with our friends and families or the people in group, in other words, who are in course oneself. When we talk with them and when we try to hear them, what they're saying is they're always proving themselves as something that is correct. What they are saying is something that is right. And regardless of whether that what they are saying correspond to reality or not, but they always support their own view. So this is how we are at this point. We as sentient ordinary beings, what we think and what we see as something, we take it as true existence. We take it as, as a reality. We think that actually what we are thinking, what we're conceiving are actually, corresponding to reality and so forth. This is how our ordinary way of thinking, ordinary way of seeing how things really are.
그때 수기 저쪽 제거서는 난지 지따랑이 저쪽 제거다.
So we are in which case we're actually supporting our grasping at self.
되지. tel라 가르 거래서는 단진디노 때 거래. 뭐보나 저러 노아 땡땡 종이 아니 노에 아니 띠목이 매바스의 신여서도 싫어 미게 뭐보나 저 뭐니 매바니 통화 뒤잖아 내 매베 tel라 뒤인 되차던 세단제비 세단다 매제고 소도 딘드기 뭐빈 내치기 통노를 사실 매바지기 다 땡제 땡라 베베기 유땡데 뭐비 자신이 매베 미비기 떼서도 시소아이나 단단 가서 이동화다 명화 이동화를 차바데 이동화에 대체제스기 이시질 미사기 이시들 라도 그래서 내용을
So therefore, then it says again, when the illumination of the knowledge of the dependent arising clears away the darkness of delusions, and the eye of wisdom sees the absence of essence and things, then there is no foundation for other reflections, and attachment and hostilities do not develop. So when one is able to apply this one's practice, one's understanding of dependent arising towards the elimination of this darkness, elimination of this darkness, then one will be able to see how things really are in reality, in other words, because then one will be able to see that, as up until now, whatever we saw and whatever that appears to us as something that we took it as a granted as something that exists in and of itself is completely wrong. We have been adopted a wrong perception, a wrong view with regard to how things really are. And when we have such understanding, then it will stop the other attachments such as hostility and so on.
되지. 딘드기 계셔시에도 걸고 가족이 빼나 이거비 내치도 팀바치이나 빼나로와 소속이 빼나네 단 대차자서질라다. 소속이 대차자서도 이거비 내치기 거의 이동화치이나 강사 스르지 통하는 걸 가르 대차자고. 그 제사 가르사도 그 이거비 내치 이동화 차되어와 소속만은 메대와지. 근데 시아다지에서 뭐가사때 타지도 소속 뭐가사때 그 타지도 유대의 주비게 뭐가사지에서 지나 메시지 통하는 걸 뭐가사지인 거래.
So let's take
나
talk.
수수 대바이나세요라. 대바이 소송한 대바이 제거야나 유대의 제바치일 거라.
If when we think that something that exists in and of itself, and there's something that exists inherently, and then such inherent qualities should appear to other sentient beings as well, other beings as well. However, it's not so. You might think that such and such person is something that's attractive, or such and such person something that is nice, and you have strong attachment towards that person. And just as you have an such attachment towards this person, but others too should have the similar attachment and attachment towards this individual. However, it's not so. Your way of looking at that person and that other's way of looking at that person is completely different. And that actually tells us the to whom you have generated attachment is not something that what you think is really are, what you think is the real. So similarly, if someone whom you think is something that someone who is so unattractive, or someone who you think is a worse person, if that worseness, the quality of this worseness exists in and of itself, and this person should appear to whoever it appears, it should be a worse person. However, if this is not happening, right? As this person may be just unattractive, and someone whom you dislike appears to you as someone who is you are negative, but some individual, such person is appear as someone who is the most wonderful individual. So that tells us things doesn't exist from its own side.
说起那的俺的俺也说生意的碰不一出去，现在的用说起那这一件的用出过来的，感觉顶这个俺的俺也说是的手里做进来的，那是一件落的铺了的呢，那可以给嘛当过来。
So it is for us that the sense of I, with being in the center of our heart, that being in our center of our heart, and it's actually, issues of it's actually, use its power to order us to what should be done.
俺的没这边那边的写书没写，热一年就比长焦多是，他的那么多把那这些多，那么把是，确实贴吧前边用路就短，当把人就把呢写成那是，他确实年头就用路就短，当把人就把短期那些吧是，马里这边。杨氏些啊，马里这边杨氏些写作上行，热一年那边参加党是，两方吧是，他去年年头就贴吧党天比到底他了，对呢，大一那么没事吧，短期这些吧，这边的呢，中写党写作上边呢。罗贝上就讲，演了几年级，当兵马里把我把了上学就转到把写吧当，年让了去的大面多把写吧塞了，的呢，年让了让些没把多比，主席全部年去的当着演了几年级马里本就完的，因把写吧继续一家把来送到。
So questions, you have already explained entry into the ultimate thoughts, the Mahayana text now explains entry into the ultimate through the text of Sharpaka reply. The fundamental deity says through obscurations by ignorance, existence recurs. And in the transition to the 27th chapter, Buddha Palita says, questions, how now illustrate the absence of the wrong views using scriptures that accord with the vehicles of Sharpaka. Reply the fundamental deity says, in this verse, I arose. This statement makes it clear that the master Buddha Palita also asserts that ignorance, which is the first of the 12 factors of dependent arising, is the superimposition of the intrinsic nature on things, and that even Sharpaka and Pratyeka Buddhas know the selflessness of objects. Therefore, you should understand that the great proof for showing the Sharpakas and Pratyeka Buddhas know that the object lacks intrinsic nature is the fact that the conception of the object self is counted as an ignorance that is among the 12 factors of the dependent arising.
哎呀，刚刚最近的人的多把些个，我们谈起听我们去去，我们谈起听我们去去干啥呢？人家你让他去去当面多把有人是，人家电信女这人是的，我们谈起听我们去去。
So this is an exclusive view of Madhyamaka Prasangika, that both Sharpaka and Pratyeka Buddhas have a realization of the emptiness of phenomena, or the non-intrinsic existence of the phenomena. So therefore, they accept the Denzin, or their grasping at true existence is belongs to the obscuration to liberations.
哎呀，最近我这光电话的卡连出了，的两个的电影送到啊，别那 yāla tūnyī jī tōmi marīpa tā nyētō yīnē rē rāngchē yīnā rāchī mē kōpa tā wā kōwa pāngurwa. Kōwa pāngwa lā marīpa tē pāngurwa. Tēnchē kī yāla tūnyī jī tōmi marīpa tē yīnē chūtā wā mā tā sī kī rāngchī chūpa sē tē dēmbā rē sī kurwa. Wā mā tāñjē yu lū lā kārsa yāla tūnyī jī tōmi marīpa tē rāngchī chūpa zī mē zimbā tē rē sī. Tē mā pāpa nyētō rāngchē sī yīnā kōwa lē tāg mā rā wā sī. Nāngā tūsā tē yāla tūnyī tōmi marīpa tē rāngshīn chūpa zimbin zimba tere, te dēnzī rē, nyōjī rē, yato kāsā dācāng pāṅga rē sē tere.
So here, in this, to summarize this, the discussions that we have is now, as long as when one achieve arhathoods, be it as a, Sherpa or Pratyeka Buddha, they are freed from samsara, or they're freed from cyclic existence. And as long as they're freed from cyclic existence, they have gained the realization of how things really are, non-inherent existence of things and event. And by seeing the inherent existence or the intrinsic existence of self and phenomena is said to be the ignorance, which is to be dispelled, which is the ignorance that we find in the 12 links of dependent originations, right? So therefore, this inherent existence, things seeing at the inherent existence, self and person, or the person and phenomena, seeing the person and phenomena in intrinsic existence, it belongs to the obscuration of liberations. It doesn't belong to obscuration of omniscience, because this is eliminated by not only the someone who gained complete state of enlightenment, but also someone who gained the arhathoods, or the be it as a Pratyeka Buddha or the Sherpa, Pratyeka or the Buddhas, yeah.
Te tomani karsa raya deme te yonjo chi taro cha de kosa nega te se teni cha na raya nyeru bagi tsangjo te la kari la son mari jishi yangsi shi se de mari bagi jibi ki chen cha na yangsi jawa shi ma nega re es tenri ki mari bagi rangshin chuban zimin zimba te na ta nyerangi ma pani baro wa.
So it says that
Deshe pa saying the goma tele chi te do.
So it says that you have already explained entry into the ultimate through the Mahayanitas. Now explained entry into the ultimate through the text of Sherpa. The native reply says, fundamentally, this is through the obscuration by ignorance, cyclic existence record. And in the transition to the 27th chapter, the Buddha Pali says, now to illustrate the absence of wrong view using scriptures that accord with the vehicle of Sherpa, and then reply the fundamental deity says that in the past IROs, it says this statement makes it clear that the Master Buddha also assert that ignorance, which is the first of 12 factors of the dependent arising, is a superimposition of the intrinsic nature on the things. And then even Sherpa and Pratyeka Buddha knows the selflessness of the object. Therefore, you should understand that the great proof for showing the Sherpa and Pratyeka Buddha knows the object of objects lack intrinsic nature is the fact that the conception of object itself, counted as the ignorance that is among the 12 factors of dependent arising.
Sanje Changi de Sibu Se Chang Dua, Sanje Changi de, because you lower it. So Robert Sanje Changi, Yala Chini, Tombi, Mari Pa, Mobola Ranshi Jodo, Shigres Laswa. Yala Junior Tommy Maripa, the Mobile Ranshi Jodo, Shigiana, Maripa, near Mapan Chinchilla, near the Dajamba Club on Dogora. Shevre, any Tessebo Chagi do Sosa, Yarana Chuji Damitoba, Selo. Tena Yarana Chuji. Rangshi meba tobi zhuxi chenpo ne sondwa, 아니 취지 단전 야라 진지 마리바 셰반데 임바 셰바 제시에서 내대전의 소도와.
So there again, let's read this again. It's an important part of it to read and understand. It says, this statement makes it clear that the Master Buddha asserts that the ignorance, which is the first of the factors of the dependent arising, is a superimposition of the intrinsic nature on intrinsic nature on things, and that even Sherpa and particular Buddha knows the self-existence of objects. Therefore, you should understand that the great proof for the showing the Sherpa and particular Buddha knows the object, like the intrinsic nature, is the fact that the conception of the objective self is counted as the ignorance that is among the 12 factors of dependent arising.
나한테지 맞춰게 런루 세너에 소소기 냥내 집에 또 가서 미바 떼서지 때 엄마 타지 다 로그마도 땅 소소 나지 뭐네 리비기 자 리비기 가서 통제 첨보다 따지 뒤서 영에다 뭐네 린지 잡아시 자 첨보 챙에나 리비나다 타입이거나 세데 저다 뭐지 이거나 따와주서 간에 예매도 르르잖아요 따네 근데 소소지 생애지나 타마 엄마 타지 받아 봐 아니 근데 맞잖아 엄마 타지 따고는 땡제 또 따선지 땡제 코로가 라나 고알인데 냐네 지체 통이나 아그 왜 내시대 엄마 타지 따로 제마 제다도서 따와된 빈시지 네 공조인 소라.
So if one can, if one is able to read and study the other philosophical, the tenets, such as Shabaka, such as Pavachika, Sotantika, Chittamatra, Madhyamaka, Swatantika, and so forth. If one is that allows, then one should go through the detailed understanding of their assertions on how things really are, and which actually is said to be a ripening of the cause of understanding the standpoint of Madhyamaka Prasangika. If that is not possible, if one do not have a time or for certain circumstances doesn't allow one to engage in those to study those texts, then one should always remain on this viewpoint, on the Madhyamaka Prasangika's viewpoint, and try to focus on Madhyamaka Prasangika's standpoint and how their explanation or their illustration of how things really are and their explanation of dependent originations will really help us.
somba chi shi chi zhuje chenpa ne chu je dan zen yan la jen jen je ma ri pa yin ba de sewa shi ba chi shi chi ji ja ba le nya to pe tong wa chin wa de ne de ren ga ba sha xie song be to ba kan yin tang je la xie ba ma yin ji chue na la ran ji ngo zhu ba zhong du be to ba yin de yin je ba le 또바네 양 따바 마인비 장신 지 로도바 때 시송신 대연 유모제제 마리바 시반 데오시 냥데 말에 데오오 냥데 강 또바 탄치지 이 리베 고반 데바네 심올레 예 마타바오 게타 마인 나 마타 예 마타바오 세티바 칠로로지다 그거는 또바 치레신데
There was 400 stanzas. The conceptuality says, and you are bound. It should be stopped here. It says, even the conceptuality mentioned in that statement does not refer to all conceptual consciousness whatsoever. Rather, to conceptual consciousness that superimpose, essential existence on the phenomena. For commenting on the passage, Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas says, as a conceptual consciousness superimpose an incorrect sense of intrinsic existence. Further, that asserts that it is effective ignorance. Hence, Well, there are those who claim that the reason, refutes the object of every conceptual consciousness that thinks this is such and such. They have done on detailed investigation on this matter.
Dende yin sarwa, masu tujin yongta ki sekora peo kharo pata sala, toba tangche pangja res, toba yina pangja yin bichagu res, eni chi peja ne seki damba ta tabi damba cheba yima re, toba tangche pangja res de kongde del togo mendo, de wonma, de toba tangche ene gaban deba ne kasa yile cheba yi sheta ma jebi kecha re songdo. Toba ne de gamba tombo yi tela, tobe tongwa chiwa te, de kasa denen deren gaba shasenge de ye toba tanji panjar si khung del tuni shiga saro.
So this is how earlier dissemination of the teachings and teachings of the Buddha in Tibet, and those the scholars have asserted by saying that their assertion is that regardless of what kind of conceptuality that may be, as long as they are conceptual, it should be eradicated. Because as long as you have this conceptuality, as long as you have this conceptual, consciousness that take place in your continuum, it will bind us within the cyclic existence, what it says. This is whether it is whether this conceptuality understand how things really are or not. And this is the binder of cyclic existence. So therefore, just as whether it is a very same things, they applies to the same, whether you're actually binded by the rope of the golden or your rope of the ordinary rope. So as long as you are binded by some kind of rope, so you are not free, so you are completely confined. So similarly, whether your conceptuality is correspond to reality or not, so long as this is conceptuality, then it should be discarded. So this is how the earlier scholars of the Tibetan scholars.
Because ranglo la toba tangche kasa tobe tonga chingwa de denen denan gaa segi toba de la ngo chube rangshin je zhondo ba toba chile segil ma de toba kanyin tangche segil ma re ese tachi.
From one's own assertion here, one's own response to this is that when we talk about abandonment of the conceptions or the conceptual consciousness, it's a conception consciousness which is superimposed on the reality. In other words, seeing things as intrinsic existence, and such conception or such conceptual consciousness must be eradicated. It doesn't apply to all conceptions.
Tate toba tangche la sewa yena juan de yor sare, teta ma yena susu juyu de kona ni je, ten kudun jube tomba ni je, ten toba minba zimbi tane me la je. Toba kanyi ba tangche yu la riba nena, nye shi je yi lang chubi, lo shi rangshi je zhon doba tan joro, teta na nyangi len debi, sakchi bi re yang tabi tawa mianpa juk gobe omi yung nang la tosan la soba sheba tangche nume dun jode shijaba le dali nyangen den ju she tomi tongda tomi de lo ta nyangen de mandawa she deshin sheba nang ju song she song so song do.
So then, this paragraph actually explains if you are unable to if you to eradicate all kind of conceptions, then this problem will we will have a challenge of these problems. What it says, if it were otherwise, then since for ordinary beings the meaning of reality is hidden, right? They would have no way of depending so the apprehending the meaning of emptiness with a non-conceptual consciousness. Also, if the object of every conceptual consciousness were contradicted by reason, then even the object of certain knowledge would be like the intrinsic nature, intrinsic nature are superimposed by the mistaken wrong consciousness. This would imply there is no correct view leading to the state of nirvana, whereby it would be pointless to do any study or the reflection on the mathematical text. For Aryabhata's 400 stanza says, seeing what is not emptiness, as if as if it were emptiness. Some say, I will attain nirvana, but they will not. The Tathagata has said that you do not reach nirvana through the wrong views.
되게 대단하게 세글로서나 또바 탄지 빠져이나 수수 조는 저 통마 대코나니 또비들라 아니 된지 된저버 세월 다 컨지 대코나니 세와 통고 말어 왔어 지나서도 이제 대 빠져이나 대코나니라 존도바나 희희 마 존도바나 저도 그래스지 대 빠져이나 베나마서 되세다 돈유도베 토사고서 렌치체베데 산주 거서라 돈유도베 된지 된저버거는 돈유도 또바로 와 아니 대양 빠져 줘서나 아니 양일랜데바 치비게 토선 고송 렌지제기 더메고 차로 그래서 지제시.
So then if you accept that all conceptions are something that is to be abandoned, and there's no way that ordinary beings will have understanding, the proper understanding of correct understandings of emptiness, or correct understanding of ultimate nature of reality. Because for the ordinary individuals, when their understanding of ultimate nature of reality in the beginning is based on conceptions, based on conceptual consciousness. But in other words, their understanding, the ordinary beings' understanding of ultimate nature of reality is through generic image, but it meaning generality, through meaning generality, in other words. As long as their understanding of is through generic image, it is a conceptions. So therefore, there will know the teachings on what we call the understanding of emptiness derived from hearing the teachings will become invalid, because once understanding of emptiness, once realization of emptiness, through listening to the teachings in the beginning, will be a conception. It is a conception. It is a conceptual consciousness, because their understanding of emptiness is based on conceptual consciousness. Their understanding of emptiness is through generic image. It is not intuitive understanding of ultimate nature of reality. So therefore, if you accept in this way, then there is no gradual process of understanding ultimate nature of reality.
다 간제 대세다 또 변나 덴바 주바 매바치 아니 덴바 돈미 돈다 통미 대세데 아니 돈이 마잉에 이제 돈이 레세네 통하이나 아니 때 로다진 차도 그래 로다진게 양일래 되고 말해세네 맞아 들으세다 변나 랑시 좀 마주고 또비 아니 지바 참아데 빠자 차소나 아니 대치대 제베고네 유튜브 로치로 로다 차소나 로다진게 아니 가서 로다치 차도로 와서 저런 데 봤잖아. 아니 된적이 로다치이나 아니 로다치데 양년에 되면 봐 성적이 송여로 와서 된적이 진짜래.
So then one argues by saying that based on your understanding, according to your understanding, the understanding of ultimate nature of reality or emptiness through inference or the inferential cognizer, through inferential cognizer, then it should be a wrong consciousness. It should be a wrong consciousness, something that is to be abandoned. If this is so, then how the ordinary individual, will gain a gradual understanding of ultimate nature of reality? Because for the ordinary individuals will not have an intuitive or direct realization of emptiness right from the beginning.
디치 다랑로라 동보 돈이 또 비송로데 투비 대대니 상중이 말에 투중 싫어지 투중 싫어 이제바데 한다도 진짜 상나도 말래 되네 아니 돈이 젬바 많이 봐 되게 대주고는 돈바니 지다 다테제 상이 요라타 쳐바지 통 되니 양대 양바 금바네 미수 통바 나기기 아니 간중이 세고로 다 간중데 무슨 뭐로이 아니 젬바데 투상 고소레지 제는 마도 아니 하도바 지 무슨 이게 따와나 이게 미존의 카도 따와나 이게 조통해서 게야 말아 공직이 이제
So now one's own standpoint here is now first one must receive the teachings on emptiness, listening to the teachings on emptiness attentively. It is by listening one will be able to generate what we call wisdom derived from listening. And that wisdom derived from listening is the conceptions. It is a conceptual consciousness. It's not a direct understanding of emptiness. That wisdom derived from the teachings or the hearing from emptiness is understands its ascertains its emptiness or ultimate nature of reality is through generic image. It is by meditating on this understanding of generic image of emptiness or ultimate nature of reality for a sustained period of time, then eventually one's very understanding of this generic image of emptiness, of the wisdom that understands generic emptiness, will then eventually will turn into a direct perception or direct realization of emptiness. Just as you will then, your really ascertainment of emptiness will become just as we look at things or the object that is on the table directly. There's no mediations. Without any involvement of any mediations, one's understanding will be then what we call the direct realization of ultimate nature of reality.
디치 다가서就是你人来呢头上写过来的等着也接把这个给予早了点呢让这世界当前去了你多年都被头上工作人之间呢他呢他没了被送就那各方面的这个呢他不说呢他那把哪一个接给你接那把就能去别那么工作送这新就老多说啥呢那我当本来你把娘的接的
Let's do our dedication prayers here. By means of our discussions for the 2 hours of this teachings of the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment, may all these root virtues become mirrors, accumulate mirrors for oneself and all other sentient beings. It is by means of this accumulation of the extensive mirrors, may myself and all other sentient beings to be able to gain complete state of normal learning, the unity of normal learning state, which is the complete state of enlightenment. And may all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions please bless me to be able to do this.
Dāgī jīnyī sābī gyāwāndī, tēndā rōwā kīnlā kāmbē dāng, chēbā jīzhēn lōsāng chābā yī, tēnbī jīmbō rīn, lēchē āyē shō, sā jīn, bījī shūjī mē tō chōng, rē rā lī jī nyē tē jīmbā dī, sāng jī jīn tō mī tē bē wā yī, 若根能道心老是不修，就我更多养道那么道，这面去就别了龙学经，撒当能就有的绕做的，多就讲给个有道修，也当个人。面着那个能养大呀面的那能的那从你。 高大仰巴感谢萨巴的 无明无人给动着我。能真教业红波道就结，电报是别财道更多样，江边养就这边结束的，天边人报更苍狼结就，年年主编见到见些小，让给这些多别浪就的，学着这边长月到个就。若月月就灭亡世间的，遥远颠簸有人在纠结，颠簸人间出给马家伙，悄悄将把这边说的，也就千百一让就把一片的。我的三万什么？世间家有民众真来来，来住相救郎就人白长，他对当就一郎白的心，家有怎么人都讲究急，老上主兵听见主席经，眼见世界莫当明明根，三老更多家业好不易。能当能当这我莫纠结，刚才的我出了就是这，最近住了尊巴的元帅，土地能就到处出西进，这些将此书要就一见，就在那边国菜上的见，那个城内数据就不到。老僧点笔正面扫空间，若叶面色到念旧节，扛着绕月过夜星光色，便当的我梦里就也念。昔日在我点子交作业，要被身体包点就一起，要被保接大钱包到，更多让我太阳的见的，得到感觉就是到了西，给我得到当街绕多光。对从西边叫我当街去。我刚了就到广播的，大仙月月早晚的跟讲，从不是些绕多光就。哎呀，多谢，天就。